So in this video, we're going to take a quick look here at the rise of Herod the Great, just noticing how he kind of comes to power. So in 47 BCE, Julius Caesar is going to make Antipater a procurator, and he's going to allow John Hyrcanus to have authority to the temple. So the Hasmonean dynasty has kind of collapsed right now, and so the Romans have kind of come into the area and have taken control. Along with this, Antipater makes his son Fassel governor of Jerusalem, and he's going to appoint a Pharisee named Absalom, uh, whose parents accordingly were, quote, converts to Judaism. Again, one has to kind of understand what we might mean by conversion when, Judaism, being a Jew is an ethnic designation. One can't really become a Jew even if one is circumcised, but one is adopting, as it were, the practices of the Jews. And this Pharisee becomes president of the Sanhedrin. And so the Pharisees and Sadducees have, since the time of Alexander Jannaeus, have had this friction about control over the temple and control over the people. And so now, with Antipater aligning himself with the Pharisee to kind of take control of the Sanhedrin, he makes Herod, his other son, the governor of Galilee. And in particular, Herod is supposed to kind of root out revolutionary groups, and there is a particular unrest that is being caused by someone named Hezekiah. And so Herod shows himself quite adept at being able to root out these kind of insurrectionists or rebellions and subdue them and deal with them very forcefully. So the Sanhedrin attempt through Hyrcanus to get Antipater to curtail the authority that both Fassel and Herod are exerting. So this is kind of interesting, where you have had, this Hyrcanus who had once great power, and now is kind of put into this position of just focusing on the temple, and now he is still being seen as someone who might be able to have influence on Antipater. So he tries to get Antipater to curtail that authority, but Hyrcanus ultimately decides to side with Antipater, and this is going to infuriate the Pharisaic-led Sanhedrin. So there's a great deal of power and control that it's trying to be exerted by these two types of institutions: the institution, the ruling class, and then the judicial class, the Sanhedrin, as well as the priestly caste, the temple caste. So after Antipater died, his sons Fassel and Herod were then appointed as rulers over parts of Palestine. In 44 BCE, Caesar, having been assassinated, and his grandnephew Octavian, at just 18, received from the weakened Senate consular powers. So this has happened. Then Antipater had died, and so the Fassel and Herod then become these rulers. So Herod aligns himself with the Hasmonean royalty. And what he does is he becomes engaged to Merimee. So Merimee is the granddaughter of both John Hyrcanus and of Aristobulus. So these two brothers, their children, got together, and so they had this child, Merimee, and so she has some pedigree here on her side. So she's a kind of a Jewish princess. But in order to do that, he's going to have to divorce his wife Doris, because the Romans don't really practice polygamy. That's not a thing that they looked upon favorably. That might have been done in more kind of Eastern cultures, but that's not really done amongst the Greeks and the Romans. So he has to divorce his wife and marries Merimee, kind of hoping to align himself with this family. At the same time, Herod is going to be befriended by Mark Antony. And so Mark Antony is one of the individuals who kind of along here is trying to exert control and power in the absence of, a clear kind of general that unites all the provinces of Rome. And Mark Antony makes his efforts more towards the east. So like in Syria and like in Egypt and, farther out east, he's going to exert his power. So Judea is going to come within his area of interest. And so Herod befriends Mark Antony, and in 37 BCE, the Senate is going to name Herod, while he is in Rome, he's going to be named King of the Jews. And then he's going to, he begins his preparations to go back and reclaim Judea from another Hasmonean who has arisen from Aristobulus' side, Matthias Antigonus II. And so he's going to claim to be the rightful king of the Jews, and that Herod, having been, part Idumean and part Nabatean, that he should not be the king of the Jews. It should be someone from a Jewish line. And as well, if you're trying to combine being a ruler, as the Hasmoneans have done, a ruler with the high priest, you couldn't have Herod, who is clearly not a Jew, being the high priest. So Matthias, Antigonus, we'll call him. Antigonus is the one then who seems to have the most advantage here in terms of his pedigree. So Herod is going to go back to Judea, but he's stalled because there arises resistance in Galilee. And as well, his patron, Mark Antony, is going to be battling some Parthians in Syria. And so he has to, as a client of Antony, Herod is going to have to help support him. So he's going to have to provide some Jewish soldiers who's going to fight alongside Antony's soldiers. By the summer of 37 BCE, with Antony's help, Herod then is going to defeat Antigonus, his armies, and he's going to finally ends up marrying Merimee. So he'd been engaged for a while, and now he's going to end up marrying her. And this is basically going to help to establish himself and his heirs as the legitimate rulers of the Jews, because you now have this Hasmonean princess and her pedigree. After capturing Jerusalem and Antigonus, Herod bribes Antony to kill Antigonus, ending that Hasmonean line. So in gratitude for Antony's patronage, Herod enlarges the Baris fortress there in Jerusalem, and he's going to rename it Antonia, Fortress Antonia, there in Jerusalem. And so this begins how Herod comes into power and how he kind of establishes himself as kind of the king of the Jews, and then really begins his kind of brutal reign and control of the city and of the area. But there are still some other forces that are going to be at play here, especially as Antony makes his alliance with Cleopatra in Egypt, and as there is continuing turmoil, with the power vacuum that seems to have arisen within Rome. So we will leave that brief description here of the rise of Herod the Great.